Greetings, everybody. It's Dr. Shirley Davis. I am so honored that you're here with me today. Give me a shout out in the chat box. Say hello. Let me know where you're calling in from, where you're joining from. I know we've got people coming in from all over the world at different time zones and in different countries. So I'm thrilled to have you. Please put it in the chat. Say hello. Give me some love. Look, I am thrilled, first of all, because it's Friday, right? But the other thing, too, I'm really excited about is the opportunity to be a continuing popular author of LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has been a partner with me for the last going on 5 years now. Of course, I've been on LinkedIn for over a decade. But the fact is that I've been working with them as an author of a number of courses. So for those of you who don't know me, I am a 30-year HR executive, corporate business leader. I've worked in Fortune 500 companies. I've been in HR for nearly 30 years. And I have also been a chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, a thought leader, a consultant, a speaker, and an author. I'm really thrilled to not only be a LinkedIn learning author, a very popular one, which I love that because people are recognizing that this course, this content, and the expertise that I bring is really relevant and timely. But also, I'm thrilled too because I had the opportunity to release the first ever diversity, equity, and inclusion for dummies. And I'm thrilled and thankful to John Wiley and Sons, who actually reached out to me to ask me to be a part of their Wiley family and to contribute to now more than 3,000 dummies books, but particularly for those who just really need to understand a little bit more about DE&I. It wasn't written for those of us who have drank the Kool-Aid, those of us who are doing it as practitioners and seasoned veterans in this. It was written for middle management, leaders, supervisors who have to really champion this, walk the values, walk the talk in the organizations, and as a leader, have to really work and lead effectively across differences. So I'm thrilled that that's out there and it's actually now on Amazon. So this book that I had an opportunity to model in this course was my second book called The Seat. It's really my third because the first book I wrote, Reinvent Yourself, and then I did the workbook to help you do the work of reinvention. And then that third book was The Seat, how to get invited to the table when you are overperforming. How many of you have ever been in that situation where you know you were getting the results, you know you were busting your butt, you know that you were making the sacrifices of your time, your effort, your energy, your family, your relationships, working hard, getting the results, but not getting noticed, getting overlooked, not feeling the love, not feeling like you were getting the opportunities that you deserved. Well, that's my story, and that's been my journey as a woman, as a person of color, as an underrepresented talent in the organizations. Again, I have been in that situation. So I'm writing the course. I wrote the book because I lived the story. And unfortunately, that's still the story of so many of my colleagues and friends and people that I have the honor and pleasure of talking to in audiences around the world. People are still feeling that sense of invisibility, that sense of being overlooked and undervalued. And that's unfortunate. So I'm working with companies and institutions and organizations and government agencies all around the country to help them build greater levels of inclusion. And that means also having that level of diversity at the table. I always say, look, there is a difference between diversity and inclusion. Although they're cousins, they are very correlated, they're integrated together, and they should work hand in hand. But diversity is about the talent. All of us are diverse in the broadest sense. But we're talking about inclusion, which you can have diversity and not have inclusion. And that's about the workplace, the culture, the environment, the leaders and the atmosphere that they create. Right. So you can have diversity and not have inclusion. So we've got to move away from just trying to make all of these heads count. Right. I mean, move away from counting heads. And we got to get to a place where we make the heads count. That's what's really key and critical. So, again, thank you so much for being here today. I'm thrilled because this is about, again, the work that we're doing inside of our organizations to ensure that all talent has a level playing field. All talent has equal access to opportunities, that all talent can thrive, that they're getting, some of the mentoring and the coaching and the sponsorship that it takes to get a seat at the table. So I'm going to talk about that. And look, one of the most common frustrations that I hear from some of my colleagues and people who just want coaching. I hear from women, I hear from people of color, I hear from other professionals that are in minority and underrepresented groups. They're asking that proverbial question still today: how do I get that seat at the table? And so this course is really about helping them to identify the strategies. Look, I know that there's a whole nother course that we could do on helping organizations and leaders open up more seats at the table and making sure that that table is more diverse. But I also wanted to speak to you, to my colleagues, to my friends who are on that journey of trying to get that seat at the table. What are some things that you can do to prepare yourself and to be ready whenever those opportunities do come? So I'm doing my work. I'm doing my work to help organizations to let more diversity at the table, diversity of thought, experiences, perspectives, cultures, languages, communication styles, thinking styles, disability, and different abilities. I'm working on that. But we also got to do our work. I had to do my work, that if I wanted to get that seat at the table, I didn't just want to be there and be counted in. I wanted to be there and to be counted. I wanted my voice to count. I wanted my ideas to matter. I wanted to have impact and influence at the table. What about you? So that's what I want to talk a little bit, but I'm giving you a sneak preview. I had the pleasure of writing this course last year, working with phenomenal team at LinkedIn. Allison, if you're here, hello, hello, giving you a shout out. Allison Hankey was my content manager, and then I'm also giving a shout out to Emmanuel. Thank you so much. And then the production team was phenomenal. And look, in this day and age, and now we've got all of the, the remnants of the hybrid workforce, the leftovers from all the work we've had to do virtually. I had the pleasure of doing this right here in my own home. And I'm so glad that LinkedIn had the technology and the capacity to be able to pivot and to still bring great value, wonderful, relevant topics to us, even though they had to shift and people couldn't come out, couldn't get to their headquarters in the production studio. So all of our homes became pseudo production studios, and I was one of them. And so, look, here's what I want to share with you. I'm giving you some snippets today, but I also want to hear from you as well. And I just want to kind of see what are, some of the ways that you are experiencing in your organizations, opportunities or not, and what are some of the biases that you're also experiencing as well. Now, for some reason, I can't see all of the chats that are coming in. So I'm hoping and praying that you are all out there and that you are chatting with us and that you're, keeping it, keeping the conversation going. So I want you again to continue to do that. So what I'll have to do is I'm going to do two things. I'm going to also put in, I'm looking at some of the others in my LinkedIn live too, so I can see some of them there. Someone says, this is great. Hi, Alexandria. Good to see you. Someone says, great to be here. Hi, Kana. Nice to see you. I see Latrice. Great. She said, left corporate America to stop this cycle for my own sanity. I did too. I had to work my exit strategy, Latrice, to get out of where I was in corporate America. Look, I love my job that I had. I was working at the world's largest HR association, but I also had bigger dreams. I wanted to do things beyond my job description. I didn't want to continue to be limited and confined. And I knew that I had a broader calling. And so you're right. I took the time. It took some years. It took me building up my faith, building up my capacity to be able to do it. And then I jumped and stepped out on my own. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to write my own book. I wanted to write my own ticket, and I wanted to control my destiny. And so, yes, that's what sometimes you have to do. I'm not telling everybody that's your path. Everyone is not called to be their own business owner, to be an entrepreneur, but you're called to something great. You're called to do that which you have been purposed and assigned and created to do. You're gifted. You have gifts and talents inside of you that are tied directly to what you're supposed to be doing. So yes, some people do leave corporate America. Look, let me tell you what, 5 million people in February alone left their jobs. The great resignation is still alive and well, unfortunately. But it's also fortunate because it's forcing companies to relook at and to reestablish the kind of workplace cultures that employees have to work in. It is causing all of them to rethink their strategies, their benefits, their leadership, and are they developed, and are they at a place where they got the competencies and the capacity and the skill set, the mindset and the attitude to be able to engage and work with people from all over the world, right? So that, and people with different backgrounds, people who look like me, who look like you, who don't look like the dominant group. But we bring gifts and talents and treasures, and we bring wonderful opportunities and ideas and perspectives that will help companies be more innovative. They'll be able to leverage us to be able to better service more clients and more customers and a more diverse community, more donors, more members from whichever sector you're in. There is power in diversity. So yes, we got to make sure that our companies continue to do this work. Someone else says, good evening, everyone. Nice meeting you, Dr. Shirley. Good to be here. Thank you. Andrea, you always, I love seeing you here. Thank you for always being so supportive. I see too, is it Kenyana? Yes, learning so much from your book, DEI for Dummies. Excellent knowledge. So thank you again all for being here and being a part of the conversation. Someone says, OMG, this is exactly what I'm going through. I had to resign from my role because I was being used and others took the credit. Yep. I've had those kinds of bosses too. I don't know about you all, but I've worked with some good bosses. The problem is I've only worked with 3 good ones. Out of my 30 years of my career, I've only had 3 really good, effective, inclusive, empathic, powerful leaders. The rest of them toxic. The rest of them is like, okay, you causing me additional stress and pressure and depression, and I'm not learning, I'm not growing. You throwing me under the bus. You taking all the credit. How many of y'all been there? Yes, we've all been there. And the problem is that we got more work to do in our organizations, and our leaders have to see diversity, equity, and inclusion as a leadership skill, a leadership competency, a leadership responsibility. It needs to be a part of your performance objectives, your KPIs, your key performance indicators. And Joanne, thanks for being here, Joanne. Good friend of mine, used to work together. After 25 years, I finally feel good that I am there, and I want to maintain it professionally. Awesome. Yes, thank you all again. Great comments. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. Thanks, Sheila, for being here. Sheila says, I'm helping others to recognize and respect your expertise. Yes. Thank you. I got a lot of amens. I appreciate that. So let me also hit on this. So let's talk first of all. I want to ask you a question. Let's do the first question. If you can put it up on the screen, is what can organizations do to really increase representation at the table, right? So now we're going to get to us, but just in general, what can organizations do to really get a seat at the table? And while y'all are writing some of that in the chat box, I see a couple more. Thanks, Lisa, for being here. She says, speak, Dr. Shirley. Fire. Thank you for keeping it real. Candace, 3 and 30 years. Yes, 3. Leaders need more of this conversation. Thanks for sharing your gifts and insight. Thanks, Candace. And look, in all of my keynotes, when I'm out and about talking, I don't care if I'm talking about business strategy, if I'm talking about culture transformation, if I'm talking about innovation and how inclusion drives innovation, all of those, I am sharing my story about how you can be a much more welcoming, winning, world-class workplace. I'm sharing my story about, being a hidden figure in the organization. And I asked them, how many more Dr. Shirley Davises are in your organizations? Those hidden figures who are kicking butt, taking names, getting the results, but they're training the people that then become their bosses and their supervisors. They are at the table, but they feel invisible. They have ideas and they've got solutions and they've got great perspectives. They got some answers to some of your business problems, and they're at the table, but you're overlooking them. You don't even ask for their opinion, or they might share it and it gets minimized. And then their male counterpart who is from the dominant group says it 20 minutes later, and it's the best thing since Wonder Bread. Or in my case, the best thing since chocolate ice cream, right? So we got that still in our organizations. I do so many DEI audits. I do so many organizational assessments and leadership competency assessments, as well as doing focus groups and doing inclusion and engagement surveys. And let me tell you, this is still real today. I'm not talking 20 and 30 years ago. In my careers, I tried to move up that corporate ladder, and ultimately I got there. I got to the C-suite, I got to the E-suite, and I got to the board. I'm on the board of several major organizations. But I'm telling you, it was wrought with feeling minimized, trivialized, marginalized, overlooked, undervalued. But I cracked the code. Before I left corporate America, I wanted to get to that level. Everybody doesn't aspire to be in the C-suite and the E-suite, but the question is, what seat do you aspire to? Right? Where do you want to be? There's a seat at the table of project leadership. There's a seat for your next promotion. There's a seat for the next initiative. There's a seat at the table for something. And so as I'm saying here, again, What are some of your organizations doing? Joanne says transitioning to a more strategic city, right? Which brings focus on HR programs. Yes, leadership needs to support and elevate. If you want to help more people get a seat at the table who are more reflective of the demographics of today and those that are expected and anticipated for tomorrow's workplace, I'm talking 2030, workforce 2030. I talk a lot about the demographic shifts that are happening, and it's our reality. And they're redefining work, the workplace, and the workers look different, and they want to work different. They come with different needs, different expectations, different work ethics, different personalities, and thinking styles. So, yes, corporations, institutions, organizations, government agencies, all sectors and industries have to ensure that you are changing the way that people experience your culture. Now, we've been in a recession. We're in a pandemic. We're going through the great resignation. We got a whole lot of shifting and stuff going on. But I've been talking to more and more organizations who are now coming back to the office face to face now that there's been a significant decrease in COVID, is that companies are now getting back to the in-person activities and exercises and even workspaces. And so what I'm telling leaders is this is the perfect time for you to reset your culture, reset your workplace, reset the experience that people have. And this is a perfect opportunity to do an assessment as to what's worked in the past and what's going to work going forward. Because as Marshall Goldsmith said, what got you there won't, what got you here won't get you there. So it's so important for us to see the need and the opportunity, right? It's a benefit for us to try to reset our culture. There's some stuff in your culture that before the pandemic hit was just toxic. Let's just admit it. It was toxic, right? You were going through a lot of disengagement. People quit a long time ago. They just didn't leave. People are not as productive. You're not getting the best work out of people. And so this is an opportunity to change your culture. And what that means is focusing on getting more diverse talent. That means focusing on creating a more inclusive culture. That means creating a level of belonging where people feel valued, respected, leveraged, included, esteemed, and recognized and appreciated. Am I preaching to the choir? Look, I hope that everybody that's on here is not just those who have drank the Kool-Aid. I hope that there's leaders on here that came because they're interested in learning more about what they can do and what are some of the key challenges. What are keeping, look, we always ask what's keeping the CEO and what's keeping the president and the C-suite leaders up at night. I think leaders need to ask the staff, what's keeping y'all up at night? Can I get an amen on that one? What is keeping y'all up at night? Because at the end of the day, talent is what is going to be the major differentiator. It's going to be the competitive advantage. It's going to be the distinction of you being a great place to work versus being a piss poor place to work. Yeah, I said it, a piss poor place to work. I'm getting some amens. Thank y'all so much. Hey, Diane, good to see you. Oh my God, Dr. Ed Hubbard is on. The guru. Look, y'all stay tuned because Dr. Ed Hubbard and I are working on some dates, and I'm going to get him on to talk about the power and the impact and the ROI of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can't talk to a global thought leader, more experienced and expert on that. So I just want to get that plug, Dr. Hubbard. We're coming on and we're going to give some real specific tactics and tips for how to measure the impact of DE&I. Yep. Joanne said, yep, they quit and they stayed. They sure did. And then I'm saying too, action in real time, not just lip service. That's what organizations have to do if they want to ensure more diversity at the table and more inclusion. Real time, not just lip service. Demonstrate inclusivity across the board. Again, someone else says leadership. Candace says leadership needs to first recognize that there are key contributors missing from the table. Yes. And Diane said, it's one thing to be at the table. Belonging is what's important. Absolutely, Diana. And then recommendations made must be respected. Employees should be a part of the decision-making process. Yeah, duh. Isn't that why we hired you? We hired you because you had qualifications, you had skill sets, you had gifts and talents that we needed. So how you gonna hire people and then not leverage the people, not tap into their opportunities, their possibilities, tap into all of the great gifts that they bring? Absolutely. Leadership needs to support and elevate. That's the bottom line. The boys club is still alive and well, but you're right, it's got to go. Right? That's not a sustainable model. That's a going out of business strategy. If you want to keep the same people who you've always had, who all look alike and think alike, that is going to derail your efforts of being a great place to work and being an employer of choice. Good, good, good. So again, thanks for sharing some of these of what companies are doing. Someone says, yes, this is the reality in corporate America. And it's the reality in organizations all around the country, all around the world. All of us have these opportunities that we've got to address in our companies. Someone says, Andrea says, we got to cultivate a culture of psychological safety to employees and feel free to share ideas. Let them share their concerns and suggestions. Yes, without fear of retaliation. I have done so much more now on how do you foster a culture of psychological safety and building trust. And even though it is supposed to be common sense, it's not common practice. Supposed to be common sense, but it is not common practice. Y'all know we got work to do. Hey, Brian, good to see you. Brian Glades on. Yep, develop people early in their careers. So key and critical. Always supporting you and learning more from me. Thank you so much. I appreciate those of you who continue to stay connected with me and feel like you're learning something. And I'm trying to add as much value as I can. I'm sharing, from my experience, but I'm also sharing from my failures. I'm sharing from my mistakes. I'm sharing from lessons learned, both as an HR professional, both as a chief diversity officer, and thirdly, as an individual, as a woman, as a minority, a person of color, and single mom, and person of faith, all of those attributes of diversity that sometimes can cause you to be overlooked and marginalized, right? So, Sue, hey, Sue, good to see you. Wow, what a blast from the past. Yep, invite and inspire. That's so important for organizations to do. And yes, this is the reality, Diana. Thanks again for sharing. So here's the reality. When we look at the demographics, we know they're changing constantly. I talked about Workforce 2030, and by 2030, yes, we're still going to have 5 generations. But do you know that by 2030, 75% of the workforce is going to be made up of the younger generations, right? Millennials and Gen Z as well. Yeah, we still got all 5 of the generations here today, but many of them, the traditionalists and the baby boomers, are going to be exiting pretty soon. But the majority in 2020, the majority of our workforce was millennials. We know that even though we've got 7 billion people on the planet, that nearly 1 billion people lives with a disability. So we've got more and more people that identify as that. We have more and more people that self-identify as LGBTQ plus, right? We have more and more people who are neurodiverse, right? They learn differently. They need different development. They engage differently. So we've got to be more sensitive to neurodiverse people. We've got to make sure too that yes, we are still focusing on gender diversity and racial diversity and age diversity. All of those are important, but let's also focus on some of the broader aspects of diversity as well. Diversity of thought and perspectives and ideas and personalities and thinking and communication styles. So yes, it's a clear business case around why there needs to be more diversity at the table. But the question becomes, why do you want to see? What you gonna do when you get there? All right, so I want you to tell me, first of all, why do you want a seat at the table anyway? And when you get there, what things are you doing to truly have an impact? So now I'm putting it back on you. I wanted to spend this first half kind of just setting the stage, giving you some broad perspectives, but this stuff is all in my new course on getting a seat at the table and making it count. I hope y'all will all take it. It's on LinkedIn Learning, and I know many organizations and corporations have membership, so please make sure that you pass this along. And look, don't just give it to the people who you know will get it. Give it to the ones who don't. Give it to the ones who haven't opened up a seat at the table. Give it to the ones who don't even see this as a value add, don't even see this as a real need, and think this stuff is, more polarizing than anything else. No, what's polarizing is not to see that this is a real business case, that this is a real reality. All right, so why you want to sit at the table? What you gonna do when you get there? Someone says, I love this quote due to its truth. Supposed to be common sense, but it's not common practice. Yep, thanks, Aaron. Glad you're here. Good to see you. Yep, just like Maya Angelou says, when we know more, we know more. And just like my good book says, is when you know better, you do better. To whom much is given, much is required. So if we want a seat at the table, let's not just get there and be futile with it. Let's get there and make a real difference. Let's speak up. Let's be allies. Let's be champions. And look, there's a whole section in the course where I talk about the second part of the course is making it count. It's not enough just to get a seat at the table and then boast about the fact that you're there, even if you're the only one, even if you were the first one. But we've got to make sure that when we get a seat at the table, yes, make a difference, but also open up more seats. Be an ally, be a champion, be a mentor, be a sponsor. Speak on behalf of those who are not at the table yet. Reach back and help others get prepared and develop so that when they come, that they can show up and show out as well. No, we don't want just anybody getting to the table, especially if it's at the decision-making table where the influential leaders are, where the executives are, even where the board members are. No, don't get to the table and not have something to say and not be prepared and then be under, right? I would say be under effective. But get a seat at the table and be ready and come with your game, right? Come with your game. Come with your game. All right. So again, someone else says have the C-suite to be committed by action and getting DE&I at the table. Yep, we definitely need that level of commitment from them as well. Good, good, good. These are some really good comments. Thanks for sharing. Someone else says, again, this is not just business. It's how you feel in your heart to live your truth and your purpose. Yes, Diane, so true. As I said, this has got to be a heart set, a mindset, a skill set, and a will set. It's got to be all of them. So let's again think about this from the perspective that there's work for organizations to do, but there's work for us to do as well. Thanks, Lisa. Lisa says to make a difference, keep the circle moving. That's why she wants a seat at the table. So what I'm asking you this, or why I'm asking you this is, because it's not enough to just say, oh, the company is racist, oh, the company is discriminatory, oh, the company keeps having, all of these, people that they're showing preferential treatment that are cherry picked. But I'm saying to you, and I've been in HR for 30 years, there have been times where people have been promoted and put in a position and they were not ready. Don't let that be your testimony. Don't let that be your reality. So I'm saying to you, while you're vying to get there, be prepared, do your work, get the development that you need, and come to that table with the ideas, the impact, the ability to impact, with some solutions, with some recommendations, and don't just be there to just be glad to take up space. So Lisa also says too, yeah, keep the circle moving and bring up a variety of folks from different backgrounds, and more importantly, incorporate emotional intelligence, communicating effectively, and again, and interpersonal skills, a major required component. Thank you for sharing that. Those are all really good reasons of why you want to be at the table. Look, here's another one that I want you to think about is for a couple of reasons. So think about this, some things that organizations can do. In the course, I talk about 4 strategies for what organizations can do to increase representation at the table. One is to adopt hiring practices and strategies within the organization that actively attracts and recruits diverse talent. That's key and critical. It also, the second thing is to enhance your workplace culture to where it is more welcoming and respectful and inclusive. So that might mean revising and updating and enhancing your values to make sure that there's inclusion built into your values, that there's belonging built into your values, that there's equity that is aligned with your values, but also that there's accountability in your processes, in your practices, and in your policies. And ensure too that this is something that not only is a talk, but it is a walk, and that there is expectations of leaders that this should be in their performance goals, that this is something that all of them should see as a leadership responsibility. This shouldn't just be for HR to do, and it shouldn't just be the chief diversity officer's position. It should be every leader's responsibility. The third thing is it calls for integrating these practices not only into the leadership responsibilities, but making sure that it becomes a strategic business imperative, that is a part of your operating plan, that the board is clear about what the DEI strategy is, and that they are holding the senior executives accountable for ensuring that things get done, and that there are specific measures of success. And then the fourth one is it requires, yes, executive, not only commitment, but executive engagement. Executives need to talk this. They need to have it on their team agendas. They need to have conversations with their direct reports. They need to do just ad hoc asking of leaders, what are you doing to drive greater levels of inclusion? When you ask them about, what's going on, they need to have it from a lens of equity and a lens of belonging. And I definitely think that it should be something that is asked in our employee engagement surveys. We should make stay interviews a part of what we do every day, not just exit interviews, because by that time it's too late. Folk done already got a job. But stay interviews are things that you do on a consistent basis, and asking people how they're doing, how they're feeling. What are what's keeping you up at night? What else can I do to better support you? Where do you see yourself a year from now? What other talents do you have that we haven't tapped into? Those are the kinds of things that you want to be asking before people become disengaged, disenfranchised, disconnected, and ultimately they dismiss themselves. Right? So that's the reality. Okay, so another question. Put it up on the screen for me, team. So here's another question. On a scale of 1 to 4, how ready do you think your organization is to really deal with diversity at the table? How ready are they? Let's see. And then I'm seeing some more comments too. Being equipped to be at the table is important. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, Diane also says, and demonstrated results. That's really important as well too. Yeah, how ready on a scale of 1 to 4? 4 meaning got this, organization's been there, done that. We are, we are the benchmark. Or 1 being, nope, not ready at all, need some real help. So on that scale of 1 to 4, just put it in the chat. Where is your organization at today? Do we have some best practice organizations that are out there? And if they're already at a 4 and they got this, tell us what they're doing, what they got, what they got that we need. I'm using, a little slang language, but what do they have that we could all learn from that they're doing really, really well? Some of them we may have already hit too. So as you're putting some of those in the chat, again, just think about what role can you play. If you are a leader, it has a team, you're a leader of a project, leader of an initiative, leader of an employee resource group, leader of a community outreach program, whatever that is, I want you to also think about how ready are you to deal with such difference, to deal with such diversity, and are you one of the blockers? Are you in the way? Are you in the way? I'm a big believer that we all have to do our own assessing and to ensure that we're, taking responsibility and accountability. So as you're thinking about that and how ready you are, I don't see them yet coming through the chat. I want to make sure we can get those. I want to hear what our company's doing to truly embrace this and to move that to that level in the organization. So we'll hit on some of those. Some of the best practices that I've seen organizations doing are some of the ones that I just hit on. But I've also seen them too, taking leaders through, the proper training and development. I've seen them allowing leaders to have coaching, individual coaching that they might need as well. I have seen organizations, and here's another one. They literally take bold steps and courageous steps to hold leaders accountable. And sometimes that means releasing them to their destiny, right? Because I always say too, if you can't change the people, change the people. And that means getting some of those blockers and those resistors that are out of the way. Sometimes you may have to say, look, this is the direction that our organization is taking. And this is the value. These are the values that we want to see displayed. And here's the feedback that we keep getting from you. So we want to make sure that we hold our leaders accountable. And sometimes you have to make an example by making that bold move. And it's really not a bold move. It really is a necessary move in order to allow people to do that. Someone says, we've been doing DE&I for 25 years and our table does reflect our world. So we're at a 4. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Respect, looking at the executive as a human being, not race, age, gender. You can recognize those things, but you don't necessarily have to hold that against people. Yes, it's fine if you want to count heads and see who you've hired, who you promoted, how you paying, who's getting opportunities, choice assignments, who's being on a succession planning list. That's fine to count those heads, but inclusion is about making the heads count. So yes, that's when you don't want to necessarily focus on just the demographics. You want to focus on the experience, right? This is about employee experience. Good. So thanks for asking that. All right, so a couple of other things I want to hit. And look, if you've got some questions, if you got some additional comments, I'm loving your engagement. But what questions do you have for me? You can certainly put those in the chat as well, because I want to kind of hear some of the things that you're thinking. Let me give you some other highlights and a sneak preview of what's in the course as well. So I also I go in talking about the misconceptions, misperceptions, and the myths of people at the table, right? A lot of times, what I hear, especially when I'm talking to leaders and say, hey, we need to do greater sourcing and recruitment. We got to make sure that we build our diverse pipeline, and we got to make sure that we are getting more and more people in consideration for leadership positions. And one of the pushbacks that I hear, and it's a misconception and a myth, is that, well, we hire only the best and the brightest. Why do we have to lower our standards so that we can get more diversity at the table? Well, how come that only comes up when we're talking about diversity or minority or underrepresented talent? Right? So that's an issue. That's a misconception. Another myth is that we don't need to hear someone tell us all the things that are wrong in the organization. Well, you can't assume everything is right. And just because you don't hear something doesn't mean things aren't going on. A lot of times, minority talent is shut down. Sometimes they don't feel like there's a psychological safe place in order to share them, and they'll go along to get along because bigger for them is that they want to pay the bills, they want to take care of their families, put food on the table, and have a shelter over their head. But that doesn't mean that they're happy, engaged, satisfied, and want to stay. So recognizing, and I tell them a lot of times in these employee engagement surveys that we do, when we're looking at inclusion and belonging, and we're looking at the level of equity in the employee experience, don't drown out the minority voice. Because if you got the majority of the organization saying everything is fine and dandy, and you got a minority voice, that's why you got to slice and dice that data and break it up by age, by race, by gender, by tenure, by region. And you do need to see where's there the highest level of engagement, but also where are the lowest level of engagement, and who does that look like? And I can tell you, in the many, many audits that we have done, the voice is still usually in the minority group. So we say, yeah, you look great. You got 85% of the organization says that everything is peach, keen, and dandy. But then you got a cadre of women, you got a cadre of Latina, you got a cadre of people over 50, you got a cadre of even some Gen Zs. You have a cadre of people who are not experiencing the culture like the majority is. And that is an issue. That is something to be addressed. So you got to make sure that you're opening up the opportunities for everybody and not celebrating whenever you have a great employee engagement survey. Look beneath the surface, peel the onion back, go a little deeper, right? All right. So the other thing too, some misconceptions and myths that I shared was that there's also a misperception that minorities who are at the table is going to spend all their time advocating for other minorities to get there. Now, what's so interesting about that is that the majority has spent a lot of their time making sure that their friends, that people that look like them, are also at the table. So it's a funny thing that whenever you have someone else who is the only one or an underrepresented person at the table, that they wouldn't also want to see more people who look like them. Look, it's key and critical. Talent cares. 80% of employees, 80% of workers, in a recent study that was done by Monster.com and CNBC, 80% of workers said they want to work for a company that cares and is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it is important to know that this is something that workers care about. And if you want to tap into the new generation of talent, that talent looks different. And yes, even the talent that looks like the majority, they also say, especially the younger generation, they've got friends, they've got colleagues, their network of people look like me, like look like you. They're different. And so they recognize that it's important to work for a company that also brings to the table people who look different and think different, and people who look like their network and look like their friends. Good. All right. So a couple of other things in the course. I talk about the business case for diversity at the table. Look, there is a compelling business case, and I think all of you know it. You've heard me say some of it, but there's a lot of great studies that's out there too. So when you've got leaders that are asking you about, what is the impact of DE&I at the table? Does it really drive innovation? Does it truly drive, performance? And does it contribute to better service and better retention? And the answer is yes, yes, and then yes. So I want you to think about some of those studies, right? Obviously, we know that McKinsey and Company continues to do this study every year where they're looking at workforce trends and they're looking at the impact to the ROI, the ROE, the ROS, right? Return on sales, return on equity, return on investment. They're looking at that and they're finding that the more you have diversity at the table, gender and ethnicity diversity, they outperform companies that don't. There's another study that was done by the Urban Edge Capital, and they found that the companies that have higher gender and ethnic diversity perform better by up to 35%. They also found that a 2% diversity mix at the board level delivers 12% more earnings. So I share some of that in there too. There's a whole section in the course on the business case for having diversity at the table. And there's another good one I love. Boston Consulting Group surveyed 1,700 companies of varying sizes, and they did it in 8 countries. So it's a global study as well. All of these other ones were global as well. But what they also found is that companies reported above average diversity on their management teams. They also reported it having innovation revenue that was 19 percentage points higher than that of companies with below average leadership at their diversity, diversity in their leadership. 45% of total revenue versus 26%. Yes, yes, that is the reality. That's the studies that's out there. And there's more, but it's in the course. So I wanted to at least give you that. The other thing I cover in the course is stereotypes and prejudices and biases that happen when we are at the table, right? So here's my reality. Comments like, "Oh, you are so articulate," or comments like, "You're too emotional," or comments like when I'm out walking, I'm out walking into a client's office and I've got some of my white male direct reports. The client starts talking to them and assume that I am the assistant or the executive director. Or as I shared with you the other example too of some of the biases that are whenever you're good enough to train all these people, but then they become your boss. So you're not good enough to be promoted into those positions. There's so many more. And I hit on some of those very pervasive biases, microaggressions, stereotypes that are still really prominent in our nomenclature and in our organizations. So I talk about some ways that we can interrupt bias. Ways that we can interrupt bias. Obviously, we know about anti-bias training. We know that we've got to be consistent. We know that there's a lack of defined processes in our organizations. But when you really start to assess where those gaps are and you start to close some of those gaps, it can heighten the impact in our biases as well. So all of us need to check ourselves. All of us know we got biases. And the question is, which ones are yours and how pervasive are they? And how do they impact the way you interact, the way you make decisions, the way you engage other people? So look, biases are not just for the majority group. Biases are something all of us have to address. So Carol, hey, thanks Carol for being here. Carol says so many excellent points. Yes, yes, yes. Diane says to work collaboratively with leaders and HR to provide high caliber diversity executives as well. Good, good, good. Someone else says absolutely true. Someone else says preach. Amen. I'm loving that. Again, any questions, put them in the chat box so I can make sure that I get to them. I was talking about some other things that we can do to interrupt our bias, and some of that's just redaction, right? Redaction. Sometimes the best way for us to prevent bias is simply to shield people from the data that activates it, right? That's a redaction. We also need to ensure that we are taking the time to get feedback from others, whether it's the 360 feedback process or what. And the other part of it is let's engage with other people who are not like us. Let's be intentionally inclusive. Let's build our network, build our of the people around us. Let them be diverse. Let them think differently, believe differently, work differently, have different personalities and different ways of communicating as an intentional way for you to grow and to learn as well. Good, good, good. And then the last couple of things I want to share that's in the book. I talk about, in the course, but it's also in the book, is being the only one in the room. All right, so let me ask that question. Put it up on the slide here. I want to ask all of you again. What are some common examples of being the only one in the organization, the only one at the table? There's some advantages to that, even though I know a lot of times it doesn't feel good. But what are some of the common issues that you face being the only one? right? And so here's some common ones that I've experienced, and I share some of those as well too. Is your ideas might be dismissed, or you might not be asked at all for your opinion, or you might not get invited out to lunch, or you might not get invited to something that's going on after the meeting is over. Some other general examples in the workplace of when we see some of these experiences happen is you are maybe assumed to be speaking on behalf of everybody else in your specific identity group. Those are some examples, or just insensitive comments that are made and no one calls it out. What if that's something that's said at the table and you don't have an ally or champion or a courageous leader that's willing to say, ouch, wait a minute, you know what was just said was a bit insensitive, or let's check that. Got to do that. Someone else says, I'm always the only one in the room. Women in tech. Yep. Women in STEM in general. You're exactly right. Your voice represents everyone like you. Yep. That is a misconception. And it's, again, one of the disadvantages of being in the room. While we might speak on behalf of some people, we're not speaking on behalf of everybody. Everybody doesn't think the way we think. And so there can't be that assumption either. All right, so these are some examples, also what we call microaggressions. That's in the course. And in the course, I also talk about 5 strategies for how you can overcome some of the negative effects of being the only one. So I'll give you 2 of them. The rest of them are in there as well. So one of them that I used was, first of all, I took my power back by drowning out some of the negative noise, and I stopped allowing myself to internalize people's opinion of me. Stop taking it so personal. Stop losing sleep at night and believing some of the hype and the noise and some of the negative feedback and coaching that I got from people who didn't know me, didn't understand me, didn't have a trusting relationship with me, and I didn't even get them permission to tell me. So that's one of them. That's what I did. Took my power back and started to say, look, you are smart, you was kind, and you was important. I started remembering, again, some of the things that I've been taught from my mom and from my dad, right? You are smart. Yes, you are intelligent. You're educated. You're gifted. You are wonderfully made. You are not a mistake. You are meant to add value. There's greatness on the inside of you. You got to speak to yourself. And so I started to do some of that. The other thing that I did was I developed the courage to speak up. Took some time because I was afraid to die on a couple of hills. I was afraid to step out there because I was the only one. It's like, okay, nobody's going to be here to protect me, lift me up, hold my arms up when I fall and pick me back up, right? But I just decided that I needed to have the courage to be able to do it. So I did. Once I got coaching and feedback, and here's the other thing that helped was I got mentors and coaches and sponsors who were also in the room. So it gave me a little bit more boldness. You know how it is when you've been in a fight, but you got your posse with you and the bully is coming at you. It's like, okay, you get a little bit more boldness and courage when you got some reinforcement. So I got some reinforcements that were in the room. So that helped me to be able to speak up more. And the more I did it, the more bolder I got and the more confident I felt. So those are some examples as well. Okay, I'll give you one more. The other one that I did was I drew on the strength and the advice and the support of those who were in my inner circle, what I call my personal board of advisors. So there's a whole nother section in there on making sure that you have a personal board of advisors of people who are going to push you, stretch you, call you out, encourage you, support you, and say, you go, girl, you go, boy, you got this. And when there's times where you're on the war field, because sometimes this feels like we're at war in our own organizations, and you get wounded, that your personal board of advisors will help lick your wounds and make you feel better and let you go back on and get back out there and fight again, right? So anyway, questions, comments, thoughts. I know we are coming up on the last part of the hour, but I wanted to thank all of you for being here. Thank you so much for your constant support, staying connected with me. For those of you who know me, look, I'm authentic, I'm real, I keeps it raw. I also want to add value. I'm teaching from experience. I'm not teaching what I read. I'm teaching what I know, teaching what I've been through, teaching what I've been able to overcome. And then also what I've learned, both as a business executive, being in the room, hearing those conversations, but also what I've learned from what I call just good old hard knocks of life, right? So I'm hoping that this is adding value, and I hope that you will take the course. Look, I'm just as passionate like this in the course. And I've got 4 other ones. And if you've taken any of them, then you know that Dr. Davis is always going to come with passion. She's going to come with high energy, but she's also going to come with high value. So a couple of other things as we're checking out any other questions. Someone says, what do you recommend if your boss promises a seat at the table and 5 years later, nothing has happened? What do you recommend if your boss promises a seat at the table, 5 years later, nothing has happened? Oh, I love that, because that is also my story as well. So, another example, another exec whose team you're interested in being on, nothing has happened, but would you go to HR? So, a couple of things. Yes. First of all, I wouldn't wait 5 years. Yes, but I recognize that they keep promising you that, because I've gone through that whole thing too, Diane, where the carrot was thrown out there and they said, if you just do this and you take that class and you get this mentor and you go through this Six Sigma and you take that quality improvement and all of this stuff, I will go do. And I went and did all of that. And then every time I would come back, the carrot would move again, or there would be another hoop to jump through. So I get where you are. And so a couple of things is, one is, you do want to at least try to talk to that leader and say to the leader, you know what, these are the things that we committed to do. First of all, write down everything that you committed as an individual development plan that you and your direct supervisor talk about on what it's going to take for you to get that seat at the table. Write those things down and revisit them, whether it's a monthly or quarterly basis. Hey, I'm really grateful that we're on this journey. Thank you so much for your support. Here are some of the things that I have done from our conversation, and here's some of the results that I've achieved. I'm really excited about that opportunity for that seat that's coming, right? So keep reminding, drop those seeds there. That's what I call, managing your manager. But also, if that doesn't happen, I go back to that boss once more and say, hey, I've noticed that, we're not seeing much movement, and I just wanted to know what else needs to be done, right? And so once they have out, there's no more for you to do, you're recognizing that this is probably a leader that's just edging you on without a real serious commitment to your development. And I would probably position it more like that. One, I would also include it on engagement survey results, but I would have that conversation with the leader and say, you know what, I am really working hard. I'm really making a lot of sacrifices. I have not gotten any contrary feedback of why I shouldn't, be at the table. Can you help me understand why I haven't been there? So have that conversation if you feel most comfortable doing that. And then if it still doesn't show any movement, then yes, escalate it to HR or to the next level. Put it in the feedback, whether you do 360 feedback on your boss or if it's in the employee engagement surveys, you can do that. But ultimately, you may have to make a decision that is in your best interest. And that may mean looking around the organization for other opportunities, look for better leaders that are going to follow through on their commitments, or sometimes it also means you got to release yourself to your destiny, and that might not be at that company. So thanks for asking that. But this is about us taking our power back as well too. But cover your bases, make sure you document, and make sure that you have those conversations. Thank you again for asking that question. Very, very good question. Let me see. There's a couple of others. Thank you, Sue. I see another comment in here as well too. You are absolutely, she says, you're absolutely the real deal. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Yes, thank you for your passion. Love your courses. So much passion is real. Thanks, Dr. Davis. Appreciate the message and the messenger. Great topic. Thank you. Great job. Appreciate all of you. I expose those workplaces, Diane. Expose those workplaces. Yes, yes, yes. So again, we know that there's a lot of companies out there that will tout that they are great places to work. They're employees of choice. And look, I've been there, done that. They have people who are full-time to fill out applications about the company, for them to be on the list. But we know that when you start looking into the organization, you find some pockets, or sometimes you find some deep holes inside of the organization where they're not walking the talk. So, Glassdoor is another opportunity too, where some of those things can be put out on Glassdoor and they are anonymous. So those are some too. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments? One thing I do want to leave you with as well is when you take the course, please, please, please leave positive feedback in the course, because that's how I continue to get to do more courses. Is one, the number of people who take it, and two, the positive reaction and feedback that comes with it. So I want to thank you for that. Just a couple of other topics that's in there that I didn't get to hit on today, but I told you I was going to give you a sneak preview. One is on overcoming career blockers. I don't know about you all, but I've had some career blockers, not just my direct supervisors, but other people in the organization. I've got that in there and some strategies for how do you overcome career blockers. Everybody probably has experienced that. I also have another one called know your own self-imposed limitations, right? Are you the one that's your biggest enemy? Are you the one that's the negative Nancy and the negative Norm in your life, right? Don't let all the things that are said about you to you be negative. So that's another one that I hit on, is how important it is for us to be our biggest champions, our biggest cheerleaders. I also talk about not only knowing what are some of those self-imposed limitations and removing them, but also know your why, know your purpose, know what keeps you up every day, what gets you excited, what is your passion, what drives you. And not only know your purpose, but know your value, know your worth, because you got to know that in order to be able to step up, speak up, and stand up for something at the table when you're there. All right. The other thing too, I think I've got a couple of others in here, but I think you got a really good idea that this course is cutting edge. It's so timely. I want to say some of my best work ever. But I also then put it in the new book on diversity, equity, and inclusion for dummies. That book is available on Amazon. But this new course that LinkedIn Learning just rolled out about a week and a half ago. So please go take it. Please encourage your leaders to take it. Encourage your boss to take it. Encourage your direct supervisor to take it, because and you know what? Let them hear today's recording. So this is going to be available on my LinkedIn profile, so you can go and attach it to an email or attach it in one of your shares, and make sure that they get to hear it as well too. Good stuff. Someone says, would you provide a letter of recommendation for those who take your course? I can provide a letter of confirmation that you were here. But if I don't have a personal relationship with you, I can't give a recommendation. But I can certainly give a confirmation that you took my course and that you were an engaged student, and that you actually stayed the entire time and learned from some of the key points that I talked about today. Thanks for asking. Someone says, all of her offerings are amazing. Oh, thanks, Latrice. I didn't pay her to say that, but I appreciate her being here. Thank you again for being here today. I appreciate all the work that's going on. If you are in this space of HR, of cultural transformation, of leadership excellence, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, might I salute you. Might I thank you for this important work. It is not for the faint of heart, and you can't just get out there and hang a shingle because you read one research report or read a book. Nope. You got to have a calling on your life to do this. You got to have the stamina. You got to have the capacity. You got to have the strength to be able to take some of the darts that are coming at you. You're going to have a bullseye on your forehead. So you got to be strong, and you got to fight the good fight. Keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate you so much. Thanks again for attending today's session. Take care.